Chris Bolt said what needed to be said. He said what I said. Can you imagine being a student at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and sitting there listening to the leaders of your denomination redefining plagiarism and calling it repentance? And of course, he's exactly right. I had an encounter after the last program with a fellow who used to work at the ERLC, and somehow, but there is no Southern Baptist deep state, only last month went from working at the ERLC to being on staff with Ed Litton, an ethicist. And I haven't seen any response from him to what I said, interestingly enough. But interesting how the ERLC is directly related to Ed Litton and to trying to defend Ed Litton. And clearly the Southwestern appearance was an attempt to get this behind them and move forward with the further redefinition of the purpose and intention of the Southern Baptist Convention. The fact that even Southwestern itself is promoting this conversation is truly troubling. It's truly troubling. A lot of folks had hoped that Greenway would be somewhat of a positive influence there, but obviously he's just part of the deep state. All the Southern Baptist Seminary presidents right now, the light's on them. If they don't come out and just name names and take a stand, then they're all in it together. All of them. Yeah, all of them. Even those that you may listen to on a daily basis. There isn't any question here. Here's my challenge to any professor at a Southern Baptist college or seminary. Define for your students what plagiarism is. In fact, all of you who teach the preaching classes, I want you to explain to your students how you will detect if they are plagiarizing someone else's work in the presentation of their sermons. And any definition you give will describe exactly what Ed Litton did, not once, not twice, but for years on end. So tell me how the president of Southwestern can sit there while Ed Litton says, I don't think that was plagiarism, while every single professor that works for him has to live with a different definition in the classroom. You want to tell me how that works? Isn't it obvious that you are saying to your students, rules for thee, but not for me? Sound familiar? We are so accustomed to the leftists in our government. Okay, it's hypocrisy. How is this not hypocrisy on the part of the Southern Baptist leadership? The documentation is available to all. There is no excuse for anybody whatsoever on this issue. None. No excuses at all. It's there. It's clear. But I suppose we will have to just play just a couple minutes, okay?
You are exactly like them.
I compared it to if the earth were to say to the sun, I am sick and tired of you being in the middle of the solar system.
If the earth were to ask the sun in our solar system, I'm sick and tired of floating out here in nothingness, surrounding you constantly. I want to be the center of this solar system.
The sun might just say to the earth, all right, have it your way. The earth is 30,000 times smaller than the sun and would not have the ability to keep all the planets in orbit. And so the solar system would begin to unravel simply because the sun gave to the earth what it asked for.
Folks, our entire solar system would fall apart. Why? Because the earth doesn't have the power of light and it doesn't have the power of gravitational force to hold this solar system in existence.
Sexual disorder, that was the first thing, verses 26 and 27. Now we've got economic disorder.
There's economic disorder. Look at verse 29.
Social disorder.
He says there's social disorder.
Social disorder, just think Facebook.
And that's just on Facebook.
Then you got spiritual disorder.
There's spiritual disorder.
You could think of that as family disorder.
And there's family disorder. They disobey their parents.
You see, there are three ways I see us really going wrong with this in the church at large.
I'm going to tell you three ways I think we've gone wrong.
Number one, we believe that God doesn't really care about this.
First one is that we don't think God cares about this issue. We make
Okay, is that enough? I mean, there's so much more. There's tons more. But it's the same outline. It's the same material. It's the same sermon. And we could have gone through the illustrations. There was an illustration before this about the guy going to the temple and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But we could go to the one where he talks about the driver's ed teacher and he makes it his driver's ed teacher and it's the other guy's driver's ed teacher. And we could go through all this, borrowing the same illustrations, using the same language, same outline, sometimes word for word all the way through. This is called plagiarism. It's not, well, some people have put some of my statements, we're talking about the same text, together with what JD said, but I don't think that's plagiarism. Okay, so here's my challenge to all of you defenders who are being paid to defend plagiarism on the part of Ed Litton. Define plagiarism without identifying what Ed Litton did as plagiarism. That's what you need to do. You can't, but that's what you need to do. And the fact that you can't do so means that you should simply step back and say, yep, it was plagiarism. And if what you're saying is, and that's perfectly fine, then just straight up say it, would you please? But to see entire entities, entity heads, and graduates of these institutions running out into social media saying that if you talk about this, you're hateful. I had some guy, everything James White says is hateful and blah, 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 blah. And, as soon as you pop up, they don't expect you to see it. As soon as you pop up and challenge them, they run for the hills. They can't, they're not going to go toe-to-toe with you. They know they can't. You've got the data. You've got the arguments. They're not going to get anywhere. They know that. But here's the situation you face. And given what happened from the podium at the summer meetings, where people weren't allowed to do things and there was shenanigans with the motions and all that kind of stuff, do you think this is ever going to just get better? Don't you recognize that these people in the U.S. government have power and they're going to do everything they can to keep it, including corrupting the system? Same thing here. May I remind you that Russell Moore was a Democratic operative? If you see the parallels as to how they're operating, you might go, huh, interesting. But you have more freedom as a congregation of believers than we have as individuals in the society any longer. Because the convention can't come after you and throw you in the gulag. So the real question is going to become, how long do you put up with this? How long do you allow the ERLC to function off the monies that your people give, supposedly to protect Christians' ethical and religious liberties? And yet this is what the funds are being used for. How long does that go on? That's a question that a lot of congregations are asking. And this is just illustrative of it. This is just illustrative of it.